you're talking about a brand new teacher who's never taught a day in his life, who even for his teaching experience in college, his internship, um, I don't think I actually ever taught a single day. I observed a lot. I didn't really teach anything. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about taking a person with zero experience and that person earning the crown jewel of, I was told they had 3 pages of applicants, so I'm probably guessing over 90 people I was going against in this in the interview process. So what I'm going to do is I knew the stakes were high. I knew I was a long shot to get the position, and I went into every interview over prepared to get it. So I'll take you through step by step what I did to earn the job. And hopefully you can use the experiences and the mistakes I made and apply them to your own job search and learn from them. So that's what I'm going to do here is I'm going to talk about that experience in just a second. So the first interview I participated in, I took my resume. And there were 2 people in the interview, not one, so I was a little bit surprised. Fortunately, I had 2 copies of my resume. I would always, when you're interviewing it, I'd always take at least 3, probably more, because you never know who's going to be in the interview. But it was the decision maker, who was the assistant principal, and her summer intern. Just like teachers do internships, administrators do internships as well. So there was a young lady doing an administrative internship for the assistant principal. I gave both of them a resume. And here's the next thing I did correctly. I treated both of them as decision makers. I wanted the intern advocating on my behalf with the assistant principal who was the decision maker. So I gave them equal time on questions. And I suspect that probably knocked out half of the field. I'm probably competing against about 90 people for this position. And I suspect a lot of people just focused on the assistant principal and not the intern, and that probably didn't go over so well after getting to know the assistant principal's personality when I got the job. When I gave them the resume, the feedback I got was that I worked for Merrill Lynch for 2 years. I was owned my own business for 2 years, and then I was sold real estate for 2 years. And they're like, 2 years, 2 years, 2 years. What makes you think that you're still going to be here in 2 years? Why would we take this high visibility position that is going to be a pinnacle part of the school and put somebody here who may not be here in 2 years? And I told them. Now, this is where a lot of people get defensive. They get defensive and make excuses. I didn't. You got to own it. You did it. You own it. Own your mistakes or own your decisions. I don't know if it was a mistake as much as a decision. And I told them, I go, this is because I followed my father's vision. I was a pleaser and wanted to impress my father, and for 6 years kind of pursued what his vision of happiness was for me, and obviously did not give me the satisfaction that I wanted. In addition to, and this was the fundamental driving force, is that my wife came home and said, we're going to have a baby. And I said, now I have to change the world, and the best way to do that is through education, and the most pressing educational issue out there is environment, and we need to save it, and we need to change the world for our kids. And so I shared that vision with them. I said, look, understand I'm completely committed to this. I've laid out a bunch of money to go back to school. I had to finish a bunch of education classes. I had to finish a bunch of biology and science classes so that I was able to be certified in biology and environmental science. And then eventually I went back and got my master's as well. So I told them, I am very, very committed to this vision. And I will convince you of that if you continue me through the interview process. So I knew I wasn't going to secure the job that day. There was no way. I mean, I was up against about 90 people. Some of them were very, very talented teachers. And here you have this person who has literally zero experience. Even in his internship, I don't think I taught a day. I did a lot of observations, but I don't think I taught a day. So I had a huge issue to overcome. And I address that in the future interviews, and we'll talk about those in a moment. So I think the things I did right in the first interview were, one, I took ownership of the decisions I made. Two, and very, very important, is that I shared my driving force and my vision and what I wanted to do. And it came across as true passion because they knew that this was what was really driving me. And that's one thing you can take away from this video, is that when you go in for your interview, make sure they know you're invested. I talked about the money I invested out of my own pocket. I talked about the time I invested a couple years after I figured out what I really wanted to do. And then I conveyed the passion that I feel for my subject matter and how important it is. Those are things that you need to convey in your interview. If you don't come across as passionate, you're going to lose out to somebody who's organized and is passionate. You got to love your subject area or your grade level. What is it that drives you? Make sure that comes across in your interview. Second interview, I took what would be referred to as a portfolio. And this was back before portfolios and different things were popular. What I did is bought a 3-ring binder. You can see my portfolio actually at the bottom of the page. I've actually saved that stuff from 1997. So this is the stuff that was actually in my portfolio in 1997. In the front, again, at the top of the picture, you can see there's a white binder. And in the binder, there's plastic sleeves. So I can put the documents I want in those plastic sleeves, and I also can put multiple copies. So one thing you should always have is at least 3 to 5 copies of your resume. I'd say at least 5 copies of your resume, and you can see on my resume down there, I actually have my picture on it. Definitely get yourself a 3-ring binder. And I would actually do this on your first interview, because I got lucky that I got moved to the second. Not lucky, I earned the second interview. But there's no guarantee nothing that guaranteed me a second interview. So take your portfolio to your first interview, have your resumes in there, and then you can pull out multiple copies from the plastic sleeve and hand it to people in the interview, depending on who's in there. The second thing I put in there that's not shown in here is my mission statement, basically changing the world to make it a better place for my children. Then my philosophy of education. This was huge. My philosophy of education aligned with the assistant principal's perfectly. I told her, I don't believe in bad kids. I believe in bored kids. I believe that even though I've not taught directly, that if a student is engaged in meaningful learning that means something to them and interested in the subject matter, that student will perform and not be a discipline issue. And that aligned with what she was trying to do perfectly. So that was big, the fact that my philosophy aligned with hers. Next, I knew that I didn't have the teaching experience that the other 89 applicants I was going up against did. So what I did is, and all of you can do this, I took the feedback I received from my college professors in my education courses and my internship, and I put all of that information into this portfolio. And the page you see below talks about how this veteran professor stated, and she actually wrote this out, that mine was the best secondary science education unit she'd ever seen presented. That was huge. I highlighted it in yellow and put it in my portfolio so I could share that with the assistant principal. The second thing that I had in there that was huge is that I was part of the university's rattlesnake research program. And I knew no one else I was competing against had that experience. And I knew they wanted this to be a hands-on course. So I really pressed that advantage. I talked about how I've done rattlesnake research, how I've been out in the swamps, growled at by alligators, hissed by water moccasins, and all of this went over huge. And I talked about the importance of hands-on learning. So even though I didn't have the direct experience with teaching a classroom, I had enough intangibles that other people didn't have to earn myself a third interview. And I figured I could press that advantage of really leaning on my rattlesnake research experience along with the glowing remarks I got from my college professors. So what you should take away from this is take the college professors who give you great feedback, save it, put it in your portfolio if you don't have any direct teaching experience. This is huge. I know another teacher who taught math, and he solely got the job because he had a letter of recommendation from a math teacher saying, this guy's the best I've ever seen. And the principal hired him immediately. And another thing I threw into this portfolio was a picture of me and my basketball team that I played on in Parsippany. And I talked about how I've been a player coach for, at the time, I guess, about maybe 7 or 8 years, and my track record. And I figured that maybe I could get a gig coaching with them as well. And that also helped pay off. So the moral of the story is the portfolio. I get most people don't have the rattlesnake research and different things like that. But all of you do have accolades and accomplishments in whatever subject matter that you're teaching. And put those in there and share it with them and show them your passion and your vision for the course. And that will go a long way. Make sure you have a mission statement. Make sure you're prepared to talk about your philosophy of education. So second interview, and we also started touching on what is probably the most important thing in a teaching interview, which is classroom discipline. And while I didn't have direct experience, I shared with them what I would do. So they gave me scenarios and I told them what I would do. And we walked through that a lot. And that's a huge thing, is make sure you're prepared to talk about classroom discipline in every single interview. And if you don't have direct teaching experience, go back and watch my videos on classroom discipline. And make sure you have those strategies memorized. I would even type up a sheet of paper and put classroom discipline on it, and then all of the different things from my video, and talk about how you would implement them and put it into your portfolio. I think that that will go a long way so that they know you at least know the strategies. So keep that in mind. The third interview, essentially it was a dead tie. It was between me and a very veteran, very, very talented female teacher, as I understand it. I actually don't know who she is or met her, but they told me a lot about her. So it came down to the two of us. So I knew going into this, I needed to press my advantage, which was my familiarity with Florida's swamps and the dangers and pitfalls out there. So I reached out to a college professor of mine and asked him to write a letter on my behalf explaining that I have the experience. I've dealt with venomous reptiles. I've dealt with alligators. I've dealt with all of these things which could come in useful when dealing with students on field trips to these places. So he did so, and I took that letter in with me. The other thing I did is in the second interview, when I interviewed with them, they did leave me with a little query, which is they said, Kris, we're still not entirely sure what this class is going to be, because they weren't following any particular class or curriculum from the state. We were making curriculum as we went. And so in the third interview, I went in with my vision, and I laid that vision out on the table with them. And essentially, I designed the whole course for them between the second and third interview, showing what we should cover, how we should cover it, what field trips we should take, what the hands-on activities and labs should be. I put all of that in there. I put together some sample lesson plans, and I took all of this in with me to the third interview. Most of you probably won't have a third interview. Most of you will probably have an answer by the end of the second interview, and if you follow my tips with that portfolio, the odds of you landing those positions is significantly higher. But if you do end up with a third interview, or you want to hear the rest of the story, essentially it came down to one question, which is that the assistant principal asked each of us, what would we do if we came across an alligator on a field trip? Because they wanted field trips to the lake that was adjacent to the school. And the other teacher, my competitor, said that she would focus more on plants and try to avoid that situation. I said, there's no way to avoid the situation as far as it could happen. It can happen in your own swimming pool. Nonetheless, out on a field trip to a lake. So I said, yes, it's a possibility. And whenever I go on field trips or go out into the field, I always have my stump ripper. Well, that's a fancy term for about a 4-foot long metal pole with a little hook on the end of it so that you can catch venomous reptiles. You can also use it to push alligators away. So I told them that if we came across an alligator, I would position myself in between the alligator and the students, have my stump ripper out to push it back if it approached us, but that alligators for the most part are placid. They're not like crocodiles in Australia or anything. They're actually fairly calm, placid animals that really don't do too much. So I told them the odds of this happening are fairly slim, but if it does happen, I got it covered. And ultimately, that's what separated us for the job. I think that having the curriculum and the lesson plans written out were big. And I would encourage you to put lesson plans into your portfolio that you're going to show them on your first interview to increase your chances. And that's how it is. Essentially, there was a fourth interview, but the fourth interview was kind of a checkbox interview. I met with the principal and he goes, "What can you coach?" He's like, "We want to hire you as our environmental science teacher. What I need to know is what you can coach and what you bring to the table there." So also, if you're a new teacher, be prepared to offer the skill set of coaching or helping out with activities. It doesn't have to be coaching sports. It can be assisting with drama. It can be running clubs. It can be a class sponsor. There's a host of things that high schools need in their infrastructure. So be prepared to chip in and help, and that goes a long way towards securing a job too. It also shows the administrators that you are more than just there for a paycheck. You're there to be a part of the kids' lives, because that's important. All right. If you liked this video and learned anything, please hit the like button. Please think about subscribing. There's going to be many, many more videos coming. And after this slide, there is a review for you. I highly, highly recommend it because there's a lot of information in there that is worth repeating or that I may have forgotten to cover so far in the presentation. So I would recommend watching that review as well. But thank you for your time. Colster out. This video has gone a lot longer than I thought it would. So rather than add a review section to it, if you want to see the review, visit my video, How to Find a Teaching Job and Rock the Interview. Again, that's How to Find a Teaching Job and Rock the Interview, and it's the second half of that video. All right, cool. Good luck with finding your teaching job, and go ace that interview.